Welcome to Soulful Couples with Dr. Jim and Ruth Sharon.
Give your love life some love.
Well, welcome to Give Your Love Life Some Love, another episode of our podcast, and this one is entitled Mindfulness for Couples. This is part of season 2 of our podcast, where we interview authors who've been involved in our book, HeartWise. And I'm with my co-host and wife, lovely wife, Ruth Sharon.
Hi there. Nice to hear from all of you today.
And our special guest today is Linda Miles, all the way from Florida. Say hello, Linda.
Hello. Hello from Florida.
And what part of Florida are you in again?
I'm in North Florida, where the seasons actually change. So it's a beautiful October day.
Oh,
great.
Lovely.
So hopefully we'll have a beautiful interview. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have a doctorate in counseling psychology. Prior to getting my doctorate, I worked in community mental health and at a psychiatric center. So I had experience with a lot of different, both mental illnesses and working with relationships. I have numerous books about relationships, including The New Marriage that I wrote with my husband, who's a psychiatrist, Friendship on Fire, Change Your Story, Change Your Brain for Better Relationships. I've done a lot of media work, as well as written for newspapers like I think I've written for the Wall Street Journal and the Boston Globe and a number of different newspaper type things, as well as online.
Wow, how great. Impressive.
Really?
I'm honored to be in your presence, Linda, Dr. Miles.
An extensive background indeed.
So I'm wondering about that title, Change Your Story, Change Your Brain. Could you tell us about that? And then how does that apply to couples?
Yeah, that's the title of your story in your book. Today's title is Mindfulness for Couples, but that's the book title.
Yes. Change Your Story, Change Your Brain is about the fact that you can literally change the structure of your brain by practicing mindfulness.
Wow.
There's a researcher at Harvard named Susan Lazar. And what she found was that people who meditated regularly increased the volume of their frontal cortex. That's the part of us that can get above it all and look at the consequences of our behavior. That doesn't symbolically increase, it literally increases.
That's fabulous.
Well, yeah.
Parts of the brain associated with compassion also increase. Now, literally, our limbic brain, which is what I call our snake brain, that is reactive and wants to fight or flee, that part shrinks. The amygdala in the brain actually we're not talking theoretically, we're talking actually. So when I say that you can change your brain with your stories, I don't just mean it's some concept. I mean, you literally change your brain.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And I'm glad you're saying it that way, too, because mindfulness has been a concept that's been bantered around a lot. And yet you're talking about some scientific evidence and some very well-respected studies on this. What exactly do you mean by mindfulness? Can you give us your definition of that? And it can be informal.
Sure. It's paying attention in the present moment so that your mind is not skittering to the future or skittering to the past. It is in the present moment. Just like right now, I hope we're in the present moment and we're not thinking of ways we flubbed up in the past or what's going to happen in the future, but that we're connected through our voices in the present moment.
Yes, and through the breath. That's always one of my favorites, to connect to the present moment through my breath. So we can ask our listeners to just pay attention, be present, look around. Where are you? What's happening? What's your breath doing? That's lovely. So how do we apply this to couples then? If we know about mindfulness and we know about brain changes, how do we encourage or apply it to couples?
Oh gosh, that is a big question.
Uh-huh.
First of all, there is the importance of your own practice so that you can identify in your body when you are in your snake brain. Now, how do people do that? You feel like you either want to fight, to freeze, or to flee. And if a couple feels like that is their only options, you need to take a time out and go calm down. And like you're saying, Ruth, breathe. And when you breathe in, you think, be. And when you breathe out, calm. So that you start to calm yourself down. You start to learn how to do that. And you don't act on that knee jerk. Do you want me to give you an example of an application to couples?
Well, yes, that would be lovely. Yeah, this is so powerful. I hope our listeners are really paying attention.
Being mindful.
Being mindful. Yes, and that's what it's about. Okay, so one of the practices you do in mindfulness is a body scan. And you get to know your body and you get to know your gut reactions. Many of our gut reactions are based on past experiences. They're not based on what's going on in the present moment. So, for example, you're with your partner, and all of a sudden you're having a conversation, and they let's say the husband turns his back. Now, if this woman has had bad experiences, let's say her mother punished her by walking away and not speaking to her for days.
The pain is there, yeah.
Pain is still there, and her body goes into this state of alarm. So she may scream. She may stop. Or she may just like freeze up and be scared. Or she may just stalk out of the room. Any of those start to create more conflict.
Yes.
They don't solve the problem. So in mindfulness, we learn to drop into our body and notice a gut reaction. And I will have to mention that Jim and I were talking earlier about working at a mental health center, and I was saying the problem I had sometimes was dealing with the staff because of all their stuff coming out. And I had to start to listen to my gut, because here's what my gut wanted to do. I had a brother that I argued with all the time. So it seemed like every staff meeting, I would want to get in an argument with one of the guys.
Play it out, huh?
And I would leave and be so miserable because we would get into a right-wrong game.
Yes.
Until finally, I could learn to drop into my body and notice that gut reaction. And that's the change your story part. It's where you go, what story am I telling myself? You know, what am I saying to myself? And you know what I was saying to myself? It is dangerous not to be right.
Yeah.
I could relate to your example. I got into one of those kind of deals with a woman in the mental health center I worked with. So we could relate a lot to what you're saying about the mental health center. I can. But anyway, that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about at the moment. But that's a great example. And by the way, I've learned to use body scans for myself very quickly in working with clients. I can, in a matter of seconds sometimes, shift myself just by that kind of scan.
Yeah, and teach them to do it. I also want to call attention to the heart as well. Our whole program is about HeartWise, activating the heart. So we know the gut's going off, and then can we tap into the wisdom of the heart that can really listen to what the situation is and what's called for, you know, and actually be skillful
And can you talk about how that may apply to couples as well? How to use that with couples beyond what you're sharing so far?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So number one is if you do mindfulness, you're going to develop more compassion. And you're going to go to the centers in your brain where you don't see your partner as a threat, but rather you can say, what's going on with me that I feel threatened, and seek to understand what is going on with them. So that's one thing. Another, I think, really important thing is to really ask yourself the question, is it more important for me to be right, or is it more important for me to be loving?
Oh,
Right.
Lovely.
Yeah, question we ask a lot too. Mm-hmm.
Drops you see how that drops us all right into our heart?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It drops you there. Now, I'm not going to go into the science right now about all of this and how the brain is all over the body. But if people are interested in delving in this more deeply, there is a researcher named Porges, Porges, who writes a lot about the fact that human beings are wired for connection.
Beautiful.
And the ways that we threaten each other, and the ways that our fear system takes over, so that we're not able to choose love.
I just wanted to comment for a second, just back to what you were saying. I've had people actually answer that question about would you rather be right or loving. I would rather be right, thank you very much. And they meant it. But we planted a seed for them. We got them thinking, didn't we?
Yes, and can I say something about that, Tim?
Please.
Right? Okay, here's the deal. UCLA did research where they measured the adrenaline and the cortisol, the stress hormones in people's blood when they were being right and holding a grudge, as opposed to when they went, you know what, this isn't that important. I can let this go. And then they focused on something that made them feel good. There is significantly more stress hormone when we are sitting there nursing our grudges.
Yeah.
Makes sense, doesn't
Building a case is what I call it.
Yeah.
Building a case, and what you're doing is you're slamming your body.
Oh, yeah.
You're stressing your body out. I do an exercise with people where I say, close your eyes for a minute and just remember a time that you were really angry. And maybe your listeners can do that. Just think of a time when they were really angry. And then what they'll notice in their body is tension. And people tell me their jaws feel tense, their stomach feels tense. Different for different people. And then I say, now remember a time when you were peaceful and connected and you felt inner peace. And what do you notice in your body? And they're like, I'm lighter. I don't feel so tense. That's stress hormone.
Right, cortisol and all the other physiology that's going on.
That's beautiful. So that's what HeartWise is to be able to stop and make those choices, make those discernments, and really see what is it that I want to do here. I want to feel tight and tense and right and on the rampage, or do I want to relax and open and listen? Because we can't listen when we're all stressed.
Well, and here's what I've learned, is that with my husband, believe me, he and I can get into some heavy-duty right-wrong things. We pretty much don't do it now because I'm not stopping myself so much because I'm so altruistic sometimes because I'm really mad. I'm stopping myself because I go, do I want to do this to myself?
Right on.
Right.
Do I want to do this to my body?
Right, just from a selfish standpoint, right? Yeah.
Self-care, not selfish.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, self-care.
I'm glad you qualified that.
I have a choice here. Yeah.
Yes, and you make a choice. And you know what? That's one of the most important things about mindfulness is to really get to where you're making a choice and not just knee-jerk reactions.
Yes. And so that's what we're calling HeartWise, is that next evolutionary stage where we start to improve who we are as human beings, right? We start to improve our self-care and our couple care and our world care. It's a beautiful concept that we're all participating in by different names. And it's just great to hear you describe all this, Linda. Thank
Gradually
you.
evolving our wisdom, including right into the body itself. Mm-hmm.
Can I share with you my favorite quote about what Ruth just said?
Sure.
It's from Teilhard de Chardin.
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
And he says, someday, after we've mastered the winds, the waves, the tide, and gravity, we shall harness the energies of love.
Oh, that's great.
Beautiful.
I haven't heard that one.
For the second time in history, man will have discovered fire.
Wow.
Ooh.
And it is fire, isn't
I
it?
got the chills on that one. That's
Isn't
awesome.
that prescient?
Ooh,
I
the
love
heart's
that.
fire.
If you could send that to us and we'll post it with your podcast, that would be awesome.
You really would. I love the quote as well. I like him in general, but I never heard that quote.
Yes.
So we're really carving out some new territory here for couples to walk on. I feel like a trailblazer in a way. Jim and I celebrate our 50th anniversary, and we've been at it for a long time and coaching so many thousands of people that, we're seeing that couples can and do move out of these dysfunctional patterns. So how does practice of mindfulness help couples do this? Could you speak to that?
Absolutely. Number one is know thyself. It's to really start to identify when you're telling yourself a story. And the way I put it is that we all have skeletons in our closet. No one is free of them. And George Bernard Shaw once said, you need to learn to dance with your skeleton.
That's my style.
Especially around Halloween, huh?
Yes, and so they're not so daunting when they come up. You're like, well, for example, Robert and I, my husband and I, named these parts of us that need to be right, Buck and Nadine.
Okay.
We're just dancing with the skeletons, okay? Buck,
I love that.
his father, who was really dominant, who just really was critical of him. Nadine came from my family because I felt like I was an alien in a lot of ways in my family, like they didn't understand me. So here's how Nadine acts. This is my skeleton. She'll talk you to death. She'll just be sitting there, putting you down. Buck, on the other hand, Robert says, I was a basketball player, Linda. I didn't waste my energy running up and down the court. I just waited till I had a great shot. And that's what he does. He won't say a lot, but if he wants to take me out, he does it like one phrase.
Laser, huh?
Laser. So we had to learn in our best interest that Buck and Nadine were not good to have show up in our relationship. And so that was our way of dancing with our skeleton.
Unless you wanted to buck heads, right? And you got tired of that.
Oh, did we ever? And, I would say that to couples, too, is so many couples in the beginning have to work these things out. And so you want to keep moving towards the goal, but forgive yourselves and take responsibility when your skeletons are in control, because they're pretty ghoulish.
Yeah. Well, they're survival oriented. And so that's where the compassion comes in for me, rather than trying to get rid of those parts, to bring them out into the light of day and recognize them and chat with them and say, what do you need now?
And unburden them. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Because our brain always is trying to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
So people will say to me, well, Dr. Miles, how do you think it protects me that I have an eating disorder? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't protect me. And I'm like, well, it did when you were 7 years old and you were in an alcoholic family and you were at a dinner table and you're thinking, well, I'll get some candy and munch on it later protected you. And When we think of that, when we understand that our brain is always trying to protect us, we can literally kind of interact with our brain and go, hey, I know this protected me at one time. Just like my arguing, right, wrong, protected it protected my sense of self. Now it's not a day at the beach.
Exactly. That's the outgrowing of the old patterns and shedding them off, like a skin shedding off a snake.
Yeah. Talk about the reptilian brain,
yeah.
the snake brain.
Right. Yeah, we have to shed those layers.
Brain. That's right.
Yeah, shed those layers so we can open up to really understanding more what's in our heart and the wisdom in our heart and the compassion and the love that we want to share.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you feel to add about anything that we've talked about or haven't talked about so far that you feel would be relevant?
Well, I think Carl Jung, the psychologist, put it really well when he said we all have a shadow.
Yes.
All have parts of us that are in our unconscious that are unsavory. And so as a couple, you can be a mirror for one another and help each other work through those things so that you don't act like Buck and Nadine.
Yes, beautiful. Yes, using the mirror to say, okay, when I said this, I saw how you reacted to that. Let's talk about it. Let's see what that is. There's something juicy there. There's some wound to heal, or there's some life energy to free up. Let's go there. And a lot of people don't have the skill. Like, how do we talk about it without blowing up the city, you know?
And the timeouts are so important that you mentioned earlier before re-engaging.
Yeah, to really get quiet and see what it is I want to share.
And I find that couples can really make a breakthrough when they can tell their story.
Yeah.
Can I give you one other example?
Please.
Sure.
And this is a very poignant example. I saw a couple, and she was upset for a week because her husband made some joke that put down some group of people. And she would barely speak to him for a week. Now, when I see the reaction is so much stronger than the infraction, I want to know what the story is.
Yes.
So here was her story. Her story was, and he never even knew this, her mother died in a concentration camp.
Oh, my goodness. And he didn't know.
He didn't know because she was a baby. And her aunt had taken her. He thought her aunt was her mother. But when she told the story about why that comment had been such a trigger to her, he had tears running down his face.
That's a great example. Go ahead.
Isn't it? So really trying to know what your stories are and finding out the stories of your loved ones without judgment. Mindfulness helps you do that.
Yeah, beautiful. So how would you define mindfulness? Do you subscribe to having a practice, a daily practice, or just whenever you think of it, or what do you say?
It is a practice. And what we know from the research is you can just do a minute, an hour, and it adds up. There are actually a number of apps now. Like there's an app for the phone called Calm. There's no one called Headspace.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
I have a blog on Facebook called Mindfulness Rewrites where I have practices. It is a practice. A lot of people stop doing it, and you don't want to stop doing it. It's a way of life. It is a way of life to keep. It's like a good example is training a puppy. They run off, your mind runs off, and you have to bring it back to the present moment. And then it runs off the other way, and you have to bring it back to the present moment. The more you do it, the better you get. But a lot of people won't do it long enough to get good at it.
I find that a lot of people stop themselves because they say, oh, I can't, I've got this monkey mind that keeps running. And I coach them because we've been meditating for decades. I say, just stay with the process, stay with the course, and it will work its magic on you.
Yes.
That detached observation.
Yes.
Well, thank you so very, very much, Linda. You've given us a lot of not only good information, but some really good stories and practical examples for application. So,
and your own presence, we appreciate so much.
Well, you too as well. You too as well. And that's what mindfulness is about, is to be able to connect with others. And then we will again discover fire.
Thanks for returning to that example.
Yeah,
that was great.
Finding the place where we're all connected. It's that paradox of being our own separate person and being connected at all times. It's such a paradox. I've just been chuckling about it all week.
Could you tell our listeners, how to reach you if they'd like to contact you? And perhaps you mentioned some of your books and work. Anything current that you're doing that you'd like people to know about?
Well, I have a new book called Change Your Story, Change Your Brain for Better Relationships. That is on Amazon. Again, I have the blog, which they just go to Facebook and they put in Mindfulness, Mindfulness, rewrites. So you're going to rewrite what you're telling yourself. So
love the title. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's another resource that they have. It's really it's a variation on Change Your Story. So those are the things that I currently have. And of course, I've done a chapter for your book, which I really look forward to that. And congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
Coming out
HeartWise, Deepening and Evolving Love Relationships. Look for it in early 2021. Well, thank you, Linda. So those of you who would like to get in touch with us, we're Jim and Ruth Sharon, and we're at soulfulcouples.com. And we have lots of resources on there, the podcasts and blogs and tips and tools and all that. And we will be putting together a whole platform of HeartWise online courses that you would love to see in 2021. So we're signing off here, Jim and Ruth Sharon.
And folks, do indeed give yourself some love, give your love life some love, as we like to say, and make that real. That's not just a slogan for us, but that's something we really invite you to take seriously and regularly.
Give your love life some love. Signing off. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.